Hey everyone, I'm back with another video talking about C-PTSD. I want to today talk about my experience processing emotions, especially as somebody who dissociates quite a bit, and I also want to talk about the role that race plays in emotional processing. And these are really big topics, so I can't say that I'm gonna be able to say everything that I want. I'm gonna do my best to speak to as much as I can, but I'm probably gonna forget some things because I've been processing for about 8 years now, more actively in my trauma resolution, and there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of ground that I've covered, and I'm probably gonna forget to mention some things, but I'm gonna do my best. And I also apologize if I space out in this video. I might take a lot of pauses, and I might be a little out of breath sometimes. I'm a little scattered. I'm moving through quite a lot emotionally through my body, and so as somebody who also has structural dissociation, so I keep kind of going back and forth between my, usually front-facing public self and then my dissociated self, and it feels on topic for the video, so I'm not gonna try and force myself to be really structured right now, because part of the reason that I'm making this video is to give myself practice with speaking even when I don't feel super anchored, so that I can document where I'm at in my process, but also so that this could maybe be helpful for someone else who's also dealing with something similar, or if you're a practitioner who works with people with these things. This kind of stuff can be really hard to put into words on the client side, which can make it really hard to communicate with your therapist or with practitioners and kind of explain what's happening and what you want help with and this kind of thing. So even though I'm not at all trying to speak for anybody other than myself, I think this could be maybe a helpful launching point to just kind of understanding what could be happening on the client side for some people who might be very dissociated or very disconnected from their emotions because of severe trauma. So I'm gonna try my best to speak to some of that, and my usual disclaimer that I'm not a mental health professional and I'm not a therapist. I have no training, no nothing, just a layperson sharing my experience. So yeah. The first thing that I want to talk about in relation to my dissociation is, as somebody who experienced quite a lot of pretty severe emotional neglect alongside other things when I was growing up, I really lacked the relational mirror that you're supposed to have with your caregivers in order to recognize your own emotional states, right? In an ideal situation, when you were sad or when you were scared or whatever, you would cry or you would express that in some way, and especially when you were very little and maybe you weren't speaking yet, you didn't have language English, you didn't speak English yet, but you communicated in other ways that your parent or your caregiver would still attune to you. And part of that attunement, what it was doing, is it was helping you map out your own emotional states within yourself, right? It wasn't just about getting your needs met. That was obviously a part of what was happening there, but there's something there about you feel scared, you're expressing that, and then your caregiver acknowledges that you feel scared, and so then you have the cognitive awareness or the building awareness of, oh, this is what fear feels like, or this is what sadness feels like, and you're able to map that out within yourself. And I didn't really experience that most of the time. And so what was pretty common for me throughout my life is when I would be in really intense states of distress, I was usually completely ignored in those moments, and I, for that reason, even if I knew that I felt sad or scared, I usually didn't understand the severity of it. And I'm someone who like has numbed during those moments. I have like spaced out, become very stoic for like many years at a time. And I wouldn't understand just how deep the distress went, and I didn't really know how to tend to it either for many years. And so throughout, as I got older, sometimes I would experience recalls to past moments of fear, or I would just be going through new challenges that would bring up their own fears, but they would pile on top of all of my unresolved anxieties, distresses, all of that stuff that I had numbed out, and become really, really big, really intense responses that I had this kind of funny relationship with, because I was still holding quite a lot back. I was still numbing and still like very, very afraid of even admitting to myself. And I didn't even know how. It wasn't even just that I didn't want to admit. I didn't even know how to admit. Like I said a moment ago, like nobody had ever like mirrored to me like, oh, I feel afraid right now. Like I wouldn't even know how to do that. And so I would be doing what I always did, which was like being really, really restrained. And normally my tendency is to like kind of overwork myself. I've always found a lot of like a sense of control in work, and like trying to put my focus, like direct all of my frenetic energy towards like getting something done. And so that's normally what I would do when I felt very distressed, is just try to get more done, when really a lot of the time I actually needed to like slow down and feel through something, but that could feel really, really scary. And part of what would be challenging is there are two kind of like metaphors, like ways of thinking about it, that have helped me understand what was happening, where I kind of think of it sometimes as like a transmitter and receiver situation, where like I said, ideally your caregivers would like mirror your emotion back to you, attuned to that, right? And so you can think of it as a transmitter sending out a signal and it being received by the receiver. But if that doesn't happen, it's sort of like you send a signal out and it just bounces. It just goes somewhere else. It doesn't hit the receiver, because it's almost like they're not in range of each other and they're not directed in the same direction. So instead of it being like you send the signal out to the right place and then that receiver receives it, it's like they're turned in weird directions, not facing each other. So the transmitter sends a signal out and then the receiver gets nothing and the signal just gets lost. And that's kind of pretty common for me, in that a lot of the time I sometimes will have a thought and I'll be like, oh, I feel this way right now. Or it'll be something like, I want to journal, or I want to go on a walk. And I'll have that thought and have that initial impulse of wanting to do something, but then it gets lost. It's like I lose it in the middle somewhere, which is always so weird and contributes to a lot of scatteredness, because there's like a disconnect. There's like a broken down bridge between those two sides, right? And the other way that I think of it sometimes is like a no man's land, where there's all of this like dead space, right? Where there's like the transmitter, and the initial part of me has this impulse, this need, this feeling, and then I also know like what the end should be. I know like, oh, when I feel hungry, the end result should be I get up and I eat something and then I feel satiated, or I want to go for a walk and the end result should be I go outside, I get my movement in, I feel like I've released something. Like I know like what the beginning and the end are supposed to be, but the middle is missing. It's like there's all of this dead energy, and because it's kind of numb, it's like there's no specifics to like get the sensory input, if that makes sense. And not only is that like a long-term kind of like disconnect that I've had, there's also a lot of fear that I have, because a lot of my numbing is related to like pretty intense, scary things that I've witnessed or experienced. Becoming aware of those emotions, you know, it comes with consequences of having to like manage the cognitive awareness of like what it all means and having to handle the emotions and recognizing them for what they are. And obviously I know that that's something that needs to happen, so I've been working towards it for many years. But it's still quite challenging because I'm somebody who was not really able to trust a lot of the adults in my life with this information. And so I normally don't really like to tell other people when I'm going through a hard time because it feels very risky to me. It feels like I'm exposing myself in a really dangerous way. And even though, you know, I do have people in my life who I trust, who I know care about me, it still feels very, very risky a lot of the time to expose how I'm feeling when I'm feeling vulnerable, which is why it's a really big sign of growth that I'm making this video, that I've started my channel. And it's a testament to how far I've come. So shout out to me for that. But anyway, yeah, a lot of the time I kind of like to deal with things by myself and kind of create like the infrastructure for an emotion to be able to land. Like, I'm not somebody who likes to just start trying to feel things without having a plan in place, which I think can probably be kind of difficult for a lot of people in therapy. Is like they know that they might need to process some emotions, but they don't really know what kind of a process works for them in that. I think one of the things that annoys me about the way that therapy tends to frame emotional processing is there's not always a lot of acknowledgement of the fact that you might need to spend a lot of time building quite a lot of scaffolding before you can get to the emotion. I think that sometimes therapists want to like fixate on like, we need to get you to feel something, like we want to get you in touch with your feelings, when there might need to be like many, many months, sometimes even years for some people, if like you have a really severe trauma history, like, I don't know, it depends on the person. You might need to spend a lot of time like building safety, building internal safety, safety with your practitioner, and like mapping out kind of a plan. And like, you know, I know that sometimes people can call that intellectualizing, and like for some people it might be intellectualizing, but I think that sometimes that can play an important role for some people to just be able to like speak the words, just kind of come up with a plan, maybe not feel anything yet, but kind of create the foundation first, so that there is this really, you know, as thorough of an understanding as you can get before you start feeling things. And of course, that's never going to be perfect. You do have to like learn as you go. You can never like come up with a perfect plan without actually doing the trial and error. So there are times when like you do just have to like kind of gently push yourself into feeling and tapping into things with like titration and kind of doing that slowly, building your tolerance and your capacity and figuring out what works for your system. You just have to like do it to figure it out. But I just think that the order, like the way that looks, the way that capacity gets built is going to look very different for different people. And I think that can actually be sometimes a source of like re-traumatization for people sometimes, when the complexities of that are not acknowledged and there's like a relational component that goes missing, where like you're not really seeing a person fully, like you're kind of just thinking of them in one aspect and going, oh, you're suppressing your emotions, or you needed to numb your emotions, so we want to get those back in line. But there are like all of these other parts of self that are also at play that I think also deserve space in the room, like the part that might be intellectualizing, or the part that, you know, even the part that's just like, I don't really want to talk about my trauma right now. I just kind of want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about this like cool art show that I went to, like those like relational elements that all kind of like come into play in the same moment sometimes. I think like the weaving together of that is pretty intricate. And I just feel like sometimes therapists kind of brush over that sometimes. Like they have a goal of like we want to get you to this place where like you're able to access this thing and you're able to feel this and move through this through your body or whatever. But it can kind of feel like all of the important parts about connecting to that person as a person get lost, which contributes to that person feeling unseen and feeling like they're not safe enough to access their emotions all over again, you know. So there's just like a disconnect in like communication, and like I think when you're in it on the client side, it can be really hard to put that into words, because you're like, you feel like you need to trust your therapist because they're the expert, and you're like, this doesn't really feel good to me, but I don't really know how to articulate that, and I don't really know how to put into words what I'm feeling, especially when it plays into like a neglect wound, or it plays into being like feeling unseen. Because, you know, the problem with like, if you've never felt properly seen, you probably don't know how to articulate what it feels like to be seen and like what you want out of that. Or maybe you can articulate some parts but not others, and so there are lots of things that get lost in translation. And it can be really hard when you have a therapist who doesn't really understand that and like isn't aware of, you know, how many pieces of information might be getting kind of lost in the process. And I just find that kind of frustrating, because I think it's something that a lot of people deal with, especially if you have complex trauma. So I don't know, I hope that made sense. I'm trying to put a kind of complicated experience into words. But my point is that, you know, in order to build safety and build capacity when it comes to feeling through really big emotions and, you know, trying to tap into anything that's suppressed or buried, it can take quite a long time. And I think that's like very normal if it takes you a long time. Like I said, it's taken me 8 years, bitch, 8 years of work before I've been able to like let myself be present in these more kind of in between moments, and like not reflexively kind of go into my I'm fine, I'm like put together, I'm good, I'm great. Like it took me a long time of like knowing that I was trying to get here but still not being able to do it until now. And it's just taken a lot of practice and a lot of trust and trial and error, like I said. And that can be really difficult. Like if you have a complex trauma history, I think everything in you is wired to think of things in black and white terms and kind of think, well, this is what my reality has been in the past, so it's probably going to continue to be this way. And it can make you not want to experiment and not want to trust and not want to try things. And I think that's so normal. I think that's like very, very understandable, and I don't really want you to like beat yourself up about that. It makes perfect sense. And also, as much as it was true in the past, and it's very, very true to like a part of you, it is still possible, you know, to like kind of stretch and like open the door into a different thing also being possible. Like multiple things can be true, and your past reality can be what it was, and you also can, you know, stretch into a new thing. Even though it requires quite a lot of work, which is unfair, you know, that like some people don't have to work so hard for something that feels so basic to the human experience, right? Like feeling your feelings, knowing how you feel. Some people don't have to work for that at all. They just had parents who responded to them, and they know, they're like, oh, I feel angry right now, or I need to go take a nap, and like there's no scatteredness that they experience or whatever. It's like really frustrating. I think acknowledging all of that is kind of just a part of the larger process, you know, and like letting yourself be annoyed and frustrated and distrustful and feeling even like rebellious sometimes. I think I've had to be so like responsible in my life from so early. And it's funny because I'm like a very go with the flow person. Like my actual personality is very, very laid back, and like I don't really like having to be in control of a lot of things, but I've had to. And so there's a part of me, like a younger part actually, around 8 years old, I started to like develop more of a, what people would call like a rebelliousness, a defiance. And it wasn't necessarily that I had that like towards other people so much as it was towards sometimes in moments where I had to make a responsible decision that felt less pressing, than the responsible decisions that I had to make around my mental and emotional health when I was growing up, or like trying to take care of something that wasn't actually my responsibility. Like for example, maybe like finishing my assignment for school ahead of time. I was a really big procrastinator throughout most of my school life because I never had any energy. So I saved all of my schoolwork until like the night before. But part of that, like putting it off, came from a defiance. It came from feeling like saving my assignment until the day before it's due made me feel rebellious in a way that felt nice because I couldn't in other areas of my life. It gave me like a very low stakes opportunity to just be like, fuck this assignment. I don't care about this assignment. And I would still do it, like I'd turn it in. But it gave me a way to like feel my age, in a very like not serious kind of situation. And I think that sometimes that translates into other things, like I've had to really stretch my communication skills because of my home life. I didn't really communicate, like I said, about like what I was feeling with people, and sometimes I'd make a lot of assumptions about how much people in my life cared about me when I didn't tell them that I was upset, And that's like that's been one of my like biggest learning curves in my 20s, is like actually expressing my needs and like being open and like being vulnerable, and also acknowledging that another person is another person, and like they have their own stuff going on, and they have their own fears that they bring to relationships, and like learning how to trust people enough to communicate with them openly has required a lot of stretching. And I think I've grown a lot and like really, really benefited. Like I think my communication skills are really great at this point, or they're getting better, and I have a lot of like beautiful results of that. But at the same time, that's been something that I still have rebelliousness. I still have a feeling sometimes of like, I don't want to tell somebody, like I don't want to tell them that. I don't want to express it to them because it kind of goes back to that feeling of like, it feels like a low stakes way to, be a little defiant. And that's also kind of a piece of the puzzle here that, maybe I'm not going to let that part of me like completely steer the steering wheel. I'm not going to let that part of me completely, take control, but I do still want to give her space. And like, I've found that humor is a really good tool for that part of me. Like, when she's in a rebellious place, I don't really take it too seriously. I mean, I acknowledge it, like I take it seriously in the sense that I value the information and I value that it's a part of myself that deserves space, but I don't overcorrect is my point. I don't like freak out and go, oh no, I'm being bad and I need to fix it. It's like, she deserves room. I kind of join her in this like amusement that still feels attuned. It's not an amusement that's like I'm, disregarding her or like making fun of her. It's not like that. It's like, I see you, and I'm kind of like joining in a way that feels comforting without blowing anything out of proportion. And the more that I attune in that way that actually makes sense for that part, the more she kind of soothes, and then I can do the adult thing and like express how I'm feeling, like put it into words, this kind of thing. And there are just so many layers is my point. Like this is an example of like having to tend to all of these different layers of something that's really complicated, and I just feel like we don't always acknowledge how complicated it is. And that makes me upset because I'm sure that there are so many people who really want to shift these things but like don't really feel represented in the way that we talk about them. And I think a lot of people can have really like unrealistic expectations about what they think they should be able to do, in what time frame, how it's actually going to look. Like, is it going to look super put together the entire way through? And it's like, no, it's really awkward and really uncomfortable. It feels cringy, it feels embarrassing, and it's not embarrassing, but it feels embarrassing, and that's just the reality of it, and it's a tough process, and I just think the more people are actually honest about that and the way that it really looks, the easier it might be for more people to want to figure it out for themselves. There are two other things. I'm at like a 25-minute mark, and I'm just cognizant of time here because I feel good. I want to keep talking, but I don't want the thing to get so big that it's going to run out of space on my phone. But anyway, I'm going to keep going for now. I want to talk about race and the way that race also plays into this, because weirdly enough, I never fucking see anybody talk about this, even though it's a huge piece of the puzzle. Totally bizarre to not hear people speak about this. But in case you can't tell, I'm Indian, Tamil specifically. I'm South Indian, and I grew up in an immigrant family. I'm the only person in my immediate family to be born and raised in America. Everyone else in my immediate family was born in India. And I grew up in Florida, and I had a very, very like diverse environment. I was exposed to like many different types of people, like different racial backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions, like wealth and gender, sexuality, like all of these things. I was like around so many different types of people from such a young age that I've always felt very comfortable being around people, like because of the fact that I was pretty neglected when I was a kid. You know, in my home life, my sense of structure came from the outside world. I like became very, very oriented towards other people on the outside, and like felt very at home in that. I felt very anchored in that, and that was my anchor from so early on. And it's interesting because like sometimes I was around people who were very, very kind and like very, very humanizing, especially like a lot of the elderly people that I knew. I had like elderly friends. They were always like really, really kind to me, and they asked me questions. Like even when I was really little, they like took an interest in me, and in a very like nurturing, kind way, they would ask me about myself, and they'd always look forward to seeing me, and like sometimes they would bring me like gifts and stuff like that. And I think that really helped me see myself as a full person in a way that I still benefit from. Like I still, kind of going back to what I said at the beginning about the mirroring thing, like because they mirrored me, I now know how to relate to myself in this really fundamental way as I continue growing into my adult self because of them. But there was something else that could also happen sometimes, where sometimes I was in certain predominantly white spaces where, because I am not a white person, sometimes there would be a dehumanization that I would experience, and like there would be this kind of, see, I just flipped into that part of myself, and it's like silent, dead energy. There was just this total like flatness to the way that people could perceive me sometimes. And I'm like a very, very Indian person, if that makes sense. Like I'm very connected to my culture. That was one thing that my parents actually did very well, is they like gave me a very, very solid anchor to my cultural identity. And so I've always felt very connected to my Tamil heritage, and like I'm a very like Tamil person. Like the way that I don't know, carry myself is like very influenced by my culture. And I've always had like a lot of healthy pride and confidence in that. And I'm also very American as well. Like I'm like very much both at the same time. And in those spaces sometimes, especially with like other kids my age, a lot of like the depth of me, because I have like a dual cultural kind of, you know, experience, a lot of the stuff when it came to like the complexity of my experience being Tamil, being Indian, being from an immigrant family, it was like it was not acknowledged. It would be disregarded. people didn't really know what to do with that information. They kind of didn't care about it. There was a devaluing of it, especially because I'm Indian specifically, and I think a lot of like American people have always had this very specific type of racism towards Indian people that's like, Indian people are like disgusting or like lacking in social skills. They're undesirable. There's sort of this like like grossness that people associate with Indian people, and this kind of disregard that kind of comes out in this like ew type of tone. And that was really confusing for me because I didn't experience myself that way. I've always liked myself a lot. Funnily enough, even though I experienced a lot of fucked up stuff in my life, I've always liked myself a lot. I've always had like a natural like friendship with myself and like a natural confidence. But it really confused me. You know, it was like building on a lot of the sadness and loneliness that I felt in my house. It was like I would go outside into the outside world. I'd go out and I'd have that shown to me again, that disregard. And it was a combination of misogyny. Like a lot of this is just misogyny, but it was also when it came to my outside environments because of my race. And there could be this tone of like, you know, the darker your skin is, the less people care about your vulnerability. Like the more people are disgusted by your vulnerability, the more you have to hide your emotions. You're not allowed to admit when you're sad. You're not allowed to admit when you're having a hard time. You kind of have to just like be perfect all the time. And perfect. You know, and it was really strange because I said this in my previous video that I made about my C-PTSD experience, where I've always really identified with like girliness, you know, that like kind of stereotypical girly girl energy. I've always really liked that. When I was little, I like loved loved princesses, loved dresses and like, you know, hair and makeup and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. Still into that kind of thing. But it was almost like people didn't acknowledge me in that way. Like they kind of took away my femininity because of my darker skin. And it's kind of like, you know, how a lot of Black women are always subjected to like people telling them that they're masculine because they have darker skin and like, you know, different features that are not like Eurocentric features. I always experienced like some version of that where it was like, if there were like a white girl my age in my class who were to like say something or do something, it would be received one way. But if I were to do it, it would have been like, why are you doing that? That's really weird. And like, you're not allowed to do that. You know, which is so fucked up, really gross. But I kind of got robbed of like a lot of being able to like express myself openly and like be myself and like try things, like have kind of developmental experiences that I should have been having because people wouldn't let me because of my race. And that also was like a huge block for me that contributed to a lot of that disconnect, right? It was another version of that, you know, putting a signal out and it not being received in the way that it should have been. And that added to that like dead space energy, that like no man's land, that made it really hard for me to read myself. And as I got older, I kept more and more of that to myself. I didn't really share myself, which sucks anyway, but I'm also an artist. Like I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I make music. I'm a very like sensitive, emotional person. That's just kind of a part of who I am. And the fact that I had to like keep all of that to myself because of the ways that it would not have been valued or respected because of a combination of my race and gender was really shitty. And like really, it got in the way of me being able to like be a full person in the way that I desperately wanted to be. And I was ready to, like, I knew in many of these moments what I wanted. And it's like I said at the beginning, you know, that thing of I know what the starting point impulse is and I know what the end result should feel like, and yet I'm not able to actually enact it and do the thing. And I'm 27 now. Like, it's taken me this long and so much like really difficult work to be able to do this now, like to be able to say this stuff openly, these things that like I would have wanted to say when I was like in elementary school, you know. This world has like set so many people of color up to like never be able to express themselves and never be able to have that internal attunement of being able to say, this is how I feel, this is what I need, this is what I need to express, to know how to do it, to feel safe enough to do it, to have the energy to do it, to know that it was going to be received well by other people, that they were going to be respected, protected, that there was safety waiting for them on the other side. Most of us have never had that, and that's by design, and it's like really terrifying. Like, I think living through the past 8 years of my life and just how fucking scary it has been, like trying to understand all of this and map all of this out when like there is such, you know, we're making a lot of beautiful progress, and I don't want to discount that, but I think I've said this before in other videos, like we're very much still at the beginning stages of talking about a lot of these things, especially when it comes to mental health, and like there is so much information that's not out there, so many specifics and intricacies that are not out there, and like having to figure all of this out on my own while I was like in such a difficult place emotionally, mentally, and I was exhausted and like very alone through a lot of this. Oh my God, it has been so hard and so scary. And I'm like almost 30. I'm like nearing, you know, I'm closer to being 30 than I am to like when I was a teenager. And it's taken me this long of like work that I had to do on my own. Like I had to choose to do it because it's not something that's like kind of widely known. It's not a process that, like I said, is fully fleshed out for a lot of people. And I'm like, okay, this is bullshit. It's bullshit. And that's putting it lightly. And I have more to say about this, trust and believe. I've made this channel because I want to talk about artwork. I haven't really done that a lot yet because I've had to like lay the foundations, and there are things that I've had to like express first in relation to like my C-PTSD and my, you know, all these other things before I can like start talking about the artwork, but it's coming. I'm working on it. But you know, I made this channel to get into the depths of the parts of the human experience that many of us have never been allowed to talk about before, or the things that have been pushed to the sidelines, especially when it comes to art that's made by marginalized people. I really, really, really believe that spending time with people's artwork is a really, really important way to humanize people, to understand others. You know, there's a reason that art is always defunded by shitty, corrupt governments, because a society that has a healthy relationship to making artwork and appreciating others' artwork is one that will not allow human beings to be treated poorly. Dehumanizing other people cannot happen without suffocating their creative expression. And there's so much depth that is held within artwork and literature and music and all these things, and that's become, you know, really, really sacred and important to me. And like I said, why I've started this channel. My nose is so itchy. Sorry, I keep itching. But anyway, I'm just sort of like balking at how much work this has taken, and how hard it's been, and how scary it's been, and how unfair it's been for a lot of people. And you know, I do have a lot of hope in things being able to change, and like what we can do to create new things for each other. But part of that is also about grieving and about calling things what they are. And yeah, there's so much that we have left to do with each other. But yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna make another video soon-ish about relational processing, healing through relationship, which is another topic that I have lots of thoughts about. But yeah, as always, feel free to leave your thoughts, and or leave them in the comments. I didn't say where. Leave them in the comments, and then yeah, I'll see you soon.